My name is Janet Crenshaw Smith. I'm president and founder of Ivy Planning Group, a consulting and training firm based here just outside of Washington, D.C. in Rockville, Maryland. And I'm delighted that each of you has joined us for this very, very important forum where we're going to be talking about creating wealth. Creating wealth. In the past, I don't know if any of you have been in previous sessions that we have held, but we are certainly delighted. The Congressman John Lewis will be joining us later on to hear what we have to say and to actually join in the conversation. But last year, we held a session called Living in the Black: Barriers to Wealth Creation in the African American Community. This session is about solutions. I think so many of us understand the barriers and understand the challenges of creating wealth. Today we have assembled a distinguished panel of experts and people who have varying perspectives on creating wealth to tee up some ideas so that we can really have a conversation that is moving us toward solutions. So our hope is that you will leave with ideas, with solutions, with tips and tactics for creating and for building wealth in our community. I'm going to start off by just introducing the panelists we have. We're going to have them tee up some ideas and give some background on themselves and positioning their perspective on this topic. We're going to have questions and answers throughout this seminar. In fact, our goal was to make this as interactive as possible. So in each of your folders, you all have some cards. On these cards, you can write out your questions. Please write them out. We have staff who are walking around the room. If you just put your hand up with the card, those will be collected, and then we will be asking as many of those questions as possible and having the panelists respond. If there's a particular panelist that you would like to respond to your question, please write that as well. But write your question on the back of the card, and we will attempt to answer as many of those questions as possible. Joining us, starting on my right, closest to me, is Mr. Kerry L. Hall, Jr. He is Vice President of Investments of UBS Investment Bank. Next to him is Mr. John Snook. He's Director of State and Local Relations with Habitat of Humanity. And then to Mr. Snook's right is Marcia Griffin. Marcia is President and founder of Home Free USA. To her right is Mr. Scott Spencer. He is manager of Baltimore Relations with the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And so we're going to start off, as I mentioned, with each panelist giving a little background information on who they are and a brief tee-up of some of the ideas. So why don't we start at the far end? We're going to start with you, Scott Spencer.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As was mentioned, I'm with the Annie E. Casey Foundation. We're the nation's largest philanthropy dedicated to improving outcomes for disadvantaged kids and families. And my work is managing the Baltimore Grant Program for the foundation. In 2002, we got involved in a redevelopment project north of the Johns Hopkins Hospital campus. For those of you who don't know, Johns Hopkins is the largest private employer in the state of Maryland, and that hospital campus employs some 25,000 people. The project really entailed what was considered a large-scale redevelopment. The neighborhood is was a very disadvantaged neighborhood, 99% African-American residents earning about 25% of the area median income, large numbers of senior citizens, large numbers of young people, high numbers of unemployment, high numbers of folks who have not graduated from high school. So you can think of just about every challenge that a neighborhood could face, and this neighborhood has it. What was envisioned for the project, and it was a request of our then mayor, was really trying to figure out how to catalyze the redevelopment of the neighborhood. And the answer that came back was to build a large life sciences campus and what was termed BOLD initiatives to transform the community. The life sciences campus is envisioned at about 2 million square feet. Originally there were 800 housing units, which is blown up to about 2,200 housing units that are planned for the project area, a new school campus, new parks and green spaces, and all of this sitting hugged right next to the Johns Hopkins Hospital campus. What seems to have almost gotten forgotten at some point was that there were some 800 households, residents, families that were living in that neighborhood. But the residents didn't forget it. And they wanted to make sure in the fact that this project was going to impact them severely, that they were going to be relocated through the process, and that they understood that this is a $1 billion project, at least, maybe $1.5 billion. They wanted to make sure that they had a piece of the pie. And so they went to their city council people and they urged that before the council approved any part of this project, that they figure out a way to make sure that they had an opportunity to take advantage of this project. What was done was there was a creation of what we call an economic inclusion agreement, and it was appended to the urban renewal ordinance, so that it's a piece of the law that was passed, and it called for it set up goals in every part of the project for minority and women business participation in the project. And it set out certain goals for every piece, whether it's construction, whether it's vendors, whether it's transportation services, whether it's somebody who's providing paper to the project. And that there is a third-party reviewer of the contracts, the workforce participation, and there's a public reporting of those numbers back to the community on the project. You got to understand from our perspective, this is the key to economic opportunity in our communities. Without minority contractors being a part of the project, without minority workforce from the community working on the project, the houses that were once valued at $30,000 and $40,000 that were going to be rebuilt at $300,000 would not be affordable. So, that being said, the economic inclusion agreement called for, as I said, for their inclusion in the project. There's a master developer that was a part of the project, and one of the requirements for that master developer was that they have a minority equity partner. Now, a minority equity partner is simply that. It is someone who actually has a financial stake in the project. They stand to gain lots of money if the project is successful. They have as much skin in the game as anyone else does, and that minority partner is a local business entity. So as the project goes up, the minority business partner gains capacity, gains market share, and gains the ability to then bid on other projects. We coupled our work in this with the economic inclusion, making sure that minority contractors had a portion of this with workforce development programs. As I said, it's a life sciences park, and so we helped to fund programs around biotech training, so that people who were actually living in the community could take advantage of a training program that would get them into a lab tech position. The construction trades, we provided an apprenticeship training program for residents to be able to take advantage of that. And we also aligned our work with Johns Hopkins, which employs about 1,000 new people a year, so that we're actually trying to create a pipeline of opportunity for residents to get into the project. I wanted to give you a couple of early results for this, and this is the work. And by the way, when I talk about our economic inclusion agreement, the city has its own its own sort of minority women business participation program. Because this is a private development project, it's a quasi-public development entity. We can go above and beyond, and so the project called for going above and beyond the city's requirements. So far, out of a total of $115 million in construction contracts awarded to date, minority women business enterprises received upwards of $49 million, or 43% of those contracts, which is pretty significant. Out of the 222,000 labor hours, 55% went to minority and women workers. And that's far beyond the goals that were established by the project of 15% for residential and 20% for the commercial projects. We're finding ourselves exceeding getting people to living wages, which is really important. In every job that we're trying to develop, we're looking for living wages. And in this era of healthcare debates, that not only are they gaining great wages, but they're gaining wages that have health benefits that go along with them. My last note in the couple of minutes that I have is that one of the great things that we have is that another member of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Elijah Cummings, makes sure that he holds the feet of the project to the fire. He calls public meetings once a quarter so that those numbers are being reported. And so that the questions that may not be answered in certain circles are being answered when he comes into a room. I'm happy to answer more questions later. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I wanted to remind those of you who just joined us that each of you has a couple of cards in your folders. Please write down questions as we are going along, and then raise your hand if you want that question submitted. Staff is walking around, and they'd be happy to collect those because we're going to have as much question and answer as part of this forum as possible. Next, we're going to have Marcia Griffin give us some opening statements. Marcia is the president of Home Free USA.
Thank you very much. My focus here today is really to talk to each one of you who may be a homeowner or a home buyer or may know someone that's in either of these situations. As we all know, we are in a terrible fix where homeownership is concerned. Just in one office that I have, which we've got offices around the country with Home Free USA, and I fund 91 other organizations whose focus is to stabilize the financial and homeownership lives of people of color. Just in my one office right here in Hyattsville, we see over 1,000 homeowners per month who are losing their homes. Now, this is no joke. And the reality, guys, is this, that as we sit here today, we are seeing and feeling and finding our financial wealth disappearing. I saw a quote, too, that I thought were very important here. One is, and you guys probably have heard this, that for African Americans by the end of 2010, that's coming right up, that we would have lost over $100 billion in real estate. This is sad. And another finding, that by the end of 2010, we will own less real estate than we as African Americans owned in the year 1910. Now, you know, things are going backwards. But you know one thing in life, it is when things are down that we've got to look up. It is when things are looking real dim that we have to really examine where we are and where we're going and what we need to do. And I can honestly say to you guys who are in here, for our homeowners, there are homeowners who know they have a mortgage problem, but are still sitting from embarrassment. That's not going to go anywhere. There are home buyers who know that they want to buy, and you've been thinking about this for quite a while, and I'm telling you, you're just sitting there thinking, this is not the time to think. You need to take some action because this is the time to buy. In Home Free USA, this is an organization that I started right here in Washington some 14 years ago. We're one of, so I have offices around the country, and as I said, I've got, we fund 91 other nonprofit organizations. And these nonprofit organizations are on the ground to help you strengthen your financial wherewithal. We are one of 15 organizations that got money from Congress to help homeowners to save their homes free. We just had a lady come in just last week. She just paid somebody $14,000 to modify her loan. And the reality, my friends, as you all know, money is made off of the backs of people who don't know. So we've got to look up, we've got to realize what we don't know, And we have to take heed. This is not the time to procrastinate. We've got to look at our credit. We've got to look at our debt. We have to look at where we're going to put our hands on some money. And we've got to be able to move forward. And you know one thing? We're going to need to move forward together with a lot of information. So I am here to answer any questions and to really talk to you about what you can do and how you can do it in terms of starting off with your own home. You can do it despite whatever the obstacles appear at this time, and I want you to know that there are nonprofit organizations, very strong nonprofit organizations around the country that can help you to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcia. If you have questions for Marcia or others, please write them on the cards. Put your hand up, and a staff member will pick it up. Also, for those of you who are standing in the back, here's your invitation to come on, take a seat. It's fine. We're friendly. I know sometimes you feel like, I cannot interrupt now and sit down. You are more than welcome to do that, to take a seat. And please do write down any questions that you might have, and just raise your hand at any time, and those will be the questions that we ask when we are finished with the opening comments. Next, we are going to hear from Mr. John Snook. John is the Director of State and Local Relations with the Habitat for Humanity. John.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I think I'm going to build a lot on what Marcia was saying. The issue that I really want to talk about today is what I'm sure you've all heard, is that the subprime, the housing crisis, what that shows is that either low-income homeownership or minority homeownership just doesn't make sense. And Habitat is here to say that that is just simply not true. And we want to help the communities across the country really take a stand to say that just isn't right. That isn't right for our communities, that isn't right for our nation, and that isn't right for our laws, and that's not the direction that we should be going as a country. What is true is that predatory lending, subprime mortgages that impact individuals in the most nefarious of ways, loans that people aren't educated about, that take advantage of those inconsistencies in what people know about mortgages, those aren't proper. What is proper is true affordability, true affordable homeownership, and truly affordable mortgages for families around our country. And it's so important that we keep that idea of homeownership in our minds, because truly homeownership is the cornerstone for our communities. We have a lot of information out front about just how important homeownership is, especially for low-income communities. Every aspect of a community that you can think about, from civic engagement to health to children's test scores, every single aspect is benefited by home ownership. And that's what Habitat for Humanity can do in your community. Our focus, we utilize no interest, no profit mortgages to ensure that families participate and are able to afford their mortgages. We utilize volunteers, and we encourage you as community leaders to participate with Habitat. The thing I'm going to be talking about today is our Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative. And what we're talking about there is really a recognition that in communities around the country, our partner homeowner families are the ones who are being impacted. Whether or not the mortgages in their community are the cause of this problem. The housing crisis has struck the economy. Folks are losing their house because they're losing their jobs, and those are in our Habitat families' communities, in our neighborhoods. We recognized that we needed to take a stand and help out. So we're changing the way Habitat works to move more than just a traditional single-family homeownership to working on rehabbing and repairing foreclosed properties and getting a new Habitat partner family in that house. We're working on doing weatherization to existing homeowners to increase the value in the community, in the inherent property values. We're focusing on doing repairs for existing homeowners, and these are all opportunities that we really encourage you as community leaders to engage in and to help us out as we move all across the country in this new initiative. I think we're really going to have an opportunity to make a difference, and we really encourage you to help out. Thanks.
Again, if you have any questions, please write them on the cards. Next, we're going to hear from Kerry L. Hall, Jr. Carrie is Vice President of Investments at UBS Investment Bank. Carrie.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here. I do have a small correction. UBS is a $68 billion company, and the investment bank is a division that I work with. They come over to the private client. I work on the private client side. The private client side means we work directly with foundations, high net worth individuals, and my focus is really to be their wealth advisor. I am honored to be here with such a distinguished panel. So I actually did a little homework, and I gave some thought on how I could be added value, because I'm really down there where the rubber meets the road. I'm there with the client. I'm dealing with the fears that they dealt with in 2008. I'm holding hands. I'm talking to board of directors, and I tried to put some things so that, more importantly, from a 10,000-foot level to even just getting started, hopefully you can take away and use some of this information and even implement it yourself. So my background is I was a captain in the United States Army. I was the Army's AT&T, so I ran microwave and satellite stations for 15 years, active duty and reserves. And then in 1993, I started with a financial firm who, by God's imagining, we would have never thought would have gone out of business. Merrill Lynch went out of business. I was there for 6 years. And I've been here 10 years. I'm now one of the old guys on the street, as they call me in the office. And a lot of times I'm teaching the new, younger financial advisors, kind of how they should manage their practice, how they should talk to their clients. I was a little bit surprised and taken back. My company chose me about 2 years ago now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, to be one of the few senior guys that went through an accreditation process. It's a 9-month program where they take you through different products, different psychological studies, and I became an accredited wealth advisor, which I'm glad I found about 2 or 3 days ago. The office called me to sit on this panel. So what I really want you to understand is what I do, and I made some notes so I can kind of gather my thoughts for this group, is I work with primarily people come to us who have wealth already. Some are coming into wealth so fast that they really need guidance, and others come to us and are just passionate about, I want to build wealth, and I want to do it right. They all have, one of 4 things in common. They say, Carrie, I don't have the time, I don't have the tools and knowledge, I've never really had a plan, I need someone to help me map it out, or I just don't have the desire to do it myself. So my job is to be their personal wealth advisor. I manage risk. I make sure things are tailored to fit them. Some of my clients don't even deal with the stock market. They deal with other vehicles. We look at their real estate. We talk to their accountants, attorneys. A lot of times I'm their quarterback. I make sure all their other advisors are on the same sheet of music. And so I am truly kind of the high-end, the champagne flight wealth advisor. I'm their personal CFO, Chief Financial Officer. So when I gathered some thoughts, I said, well, let me start by telling you a little bit about the definition of wealth, which is, there's a common word when I was doing some research the last couple of days. It's the abundance, I think is the operative word. It's the abundance of wealth, material possessions, or resources to include property that has money value or exchangeable value, all material objects that have economic utility, useful goods, an individual, community, region, or country that has an abundance of such possessions, resources, is also called wealthy. Aristotle insisted that wealth was essentially for nobility, but it had to be inherited wealth. Historically, a lot of wealth, you weren't considered wealthy unless you inherited the wealth. Adam Smith, who has the historical book, I call it more iconic, The Wealth of Nations, he states that the annual produce of land and labor of the society, the produce at its simplest form, is what satisfies human needs and wants. But the popular usage is wealth can be considered described as an abundance of items of economic value or the state of controlling or possessing such item, usually in the form of money, various investments, real estate, personal property. Now, what was really surprising is how they broke up the classes, the upper class, the middle class, the working class. And think about maybe where you lie or where your network lies. The upper class, what do they focus on? The accumulation of wealth. They focus on wealth. It fosters best known for the growth of power. In turn, it produces privileges, and it's conducive to more wealth. They teach their children, the upper class, and a synonym I found in my research is socialized. Is not just teach. They're socialized in how to manage this power, channel the privilege in many different forms, such as gaining access to others, capital, and critical information. This allows them to get more information. They learn by listening to professionals and advisors, procedures, techniques, that the upper class are able to maintain their wealth and pass it along. And they necessarily do not have a strong work ethic. The middle class is distinctly different. The middle class, compared to those of the upper class, have their beliefs of focus on wealth places a greater emphasis on the income. The middle class views wealth as simply something for emergencies. It is seen as more of a cushion. The class comprises of people that were raised by families that typically own their own home, plan ahead, and stress the importance of education and achievement. They earn a significant amount of income, also significant amounts of compensation. However, there is limited savings, with the exception of retirement pensions and home ownership. They socialize and accumulate wealth through structured and institutional type agreements like IRAs, 401ks, deferred comps. Without this set structure, asset accumulation may not occur. The working class has fewer options, obviously, for advancement and wealth accumulation than the upper and middle class. They have limited income, unstable unemployment, and insignificant retirement pension accounts. Access to structured asset accumulation programs, such as retirement pensions, are not readily available in those in this class, and as a result, have little earnings and are actually do not save or invest. Consequently, they are limited to their financial cushion available in times of hardship, such as divorce or major illness, and sometimes, like their parents and their children who lack assets, they don't plan for the future. So when I look at my clients, I have seen, which I'll talk about hopefully when you have asked questions, that there's some common traits that they have in common. There's some things they do right, and there's things they come to me with guidance. So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carrie. You know, we have already decided to adjust the format for this afternoon. First, we were going to ask some questions that we had in mind, but we have gotten so many cards already with questions from you. We're going to go for that, because we want to make sure that we're addressing the question, the real questions in the room. And they are so different from each other. So I'm just going to start with one here. And I am directing this to, it's not to a particular person on the panel, so let me just direct it to you. As a single mother struggling to make ends meet, where is a good place to start creating wealth? A 9-to-5 keeps you in a rut, gives you just enough to live. I need real wealth. Private school education for my son, home ownership, credit improvement, savings, etc. What do you think, panel? Yeah.
Well, that's a good one.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I will start, and I think I'll probably turn this over to Carl or someone else here, but yeah, that's a real good one. And it's interesting when I heard Carl's analysis of the middle class and the working class. Carrie, I'm sorry.
Like Cary Grant, Carrie.
Okay. Carrie, okay, Carrie. Well, I guess we all fall somewhere between working class and middle class, but we've got upper class desires.
Right.
No question about it. And clearly, I think that the question that we have here is a good one. Where do we start? Well, certainly for me, I would say we've got to focus on where we are. We all want to, to send our kids to private school, and we all want to do a whole lot, but we've got to be real about where we are and what we have. We've got to look at the income that we have coming in, and clearly we have to look at how much money is coming in versus how much money is going out. For many of us, we've got more money going out than we have coming in, or at least the money that comes in goes out so fast we don't even know where it's going. So we've got to really get a grip on that, first of all. Clearly, I would say for me that it needs to start with home ownership. I mean, I would say that if a person, particularly if you have children, look at getting your credit and everything in order. So we've got to decide what we want to do. We need to look at where we can, put our hands on some money and buy a home, and where we want to buy and how we're going to be able to make things happen. Once we get into our home, and we've got to have a little money saved. Now, I know sometimes that folks feel that having money saved, it's kind of difficult. We all know that. But I will tell you that you've got to figure out, and that's a whole nother class, a whole nother session for us, but how you're going to be able to keep some money to the side, whether it's through automatic deposit or whatever other means. We really are going to need to have some money that we can set aside to move forward. As long as we continue spending everything that we have, then it's going to be difficult. So I will turn that over to Carrie, perhaps, and maybe you could ask. Carrie?
Okay. Everything she says makes sense. She's hitting the nail on the head. Where I come in is actually helping people implement those strategies. And for a single mother with kids, it comes to a point where you're just going to have to tighten the belt and say, how can I really achieve? How can I manage my time and put money away the way I need to? You got to put pencil to pad and kind of take a deep look at, what are you spending and then what are you saving, and then you're going to have to eliminate those things that are what's called variable costs and really start to bump up the savings, because you can't really rob Pete to pay Paul. You can't continue to run up your credit. And many people, when they come to us, have pretty much, gotten that much down. And what's going to be challenging in our community is we're going to have to become more educated about some of the financial terms, some of the risks, and then trusting advisors. A common trait with our clients, we found, is a lot of them, despite their education, they have, and I mean their education, their area of expertise, have very limited time. So what they do is they reach out to people like me, they reach out to an accountant, they reach out to an attorney, so they can get the best advice. And we're in the information stage, so you can go online, you can Google, you can compare professionals, you can talk to friends, and then when you get started in the saving process, you have to put money away, and you have to let the power of the growth of money, without spending it, let it sit and grow and put it in the proper areas. All the other different instruments, that's another discussion, but there's a lot of different instruments to help your money grow a little bit faster.
I'll give you a couple of discrete examples. One is that if you're seeking education, there are certain programs, there are certain schools out there, certain colleges out there that actually would work with you. Being a single mother who provide daycare services or night care services that work and create, have programs that are tailored to your schedule. Number two, I would say that there is a program called the Cash Campaign. And the Cash Campaign is creating asset savings and health. And they work with families to help them do free income tax preparation, taking advantage of all those public benefits that are available to you, like the earned income tax credit and things like that, so that you can actually take advantage of the federal resources that are available, so that you can actually start this pathway to building wealth. And so you're not going to that payday, that payday lending service or the tax return services, so you can get that quick cash. Number three is, frankly, I would say, don't discount a public education for your child. It is work. It is work finding a good school, but trying to keep up with the Joneses and for a private school when public education can be just as good is I think a dollar that you can be saving towards something else. So those are three things I would say.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I just want to add just something to that. There are nonprofit organizations that HUD funds around the country, like Home Free USA, but there are many others. In many other housing, counseling organizations, homeownership providing organizations that will help you with the budgeting, help you with the spending, help you with the savings. So we want you to know that, see, it's easy for people to sit up here and say, stop spending, don't, save and correct your credit and all of that. But folks need some direction, some hand-holding, and some help. We understand it. No problem with that. This is what our job is.
Thank you. There's a big mix of questions which says there are a lot of different needs in the room. So here's just another quick question for Scott. How can individual business owners or nonprofits create community redevelopment projects in low-income communities, i.e., councils, visiting city councils or grants? But how can individual business owners or nonprofits create community redevelopment projects in low-income communities?
Probably not a popular answer, but I would say one of the biggest challenges that I see is that everybody wants to do it themselves. And in this time and in this era, the spirit of collaboration is about the only way that you're going to make it ahead. And so that means giving up a little ego, giving up a little bit of space, and finding somebody who has a different capacity. Not everybody is meant to be a community development corporation. So find out, understand what it is that you do best. Some people are excellent housing counselors, and that is one of the best things you can do in terms of creating community development opportunities and sustainable community development, is making sure that people understand what they're doing when they get into a house and how to stay into a house so that foreclosures don't occur in marketplaces and people don't lose wealth in neighborhoods. Figure it out, partner with other people. And then actually there are lots of resources out there to take advantage of, whether it is tapping into the Small Business Administration or something else I've seen particularly in Cleveland and other places where they're actually tapping into retirees.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Our goal is to make sure we get through as many questions as possible and as many answers as possible. So we're going to run through real quick. All right. Once a homeowner has filed bankruptcy in an effort to save their home, what help, if any, is available to them? Most mortgage companies won't do anything once bankruptcy has been filed.
Well, there are a lot of issues that would have to be considered in getting one's loan modified. Obviously, if one just filed bankruptcy last year, this year, or just recently, that's going to put a stop to a lot of things. If you file bankruptcy 7 years or 5 years, the longer it is, the longer the span is between your filing and now, the better off it is. In working on modifications, you can get a loan modified even with the bankruptcy. But it really just depends on a lot of situations. The lenders, with President Obama, are a lot more open. They're not open enough, but they're a lot more open than they were last year this time. And the government is forcing these lenders to really try every strategy, like with Making Home Affordable, which is a new program, to try to keep folks in their homes. And so I just would recommend to have go to HUD.gov. You can talk to me afterwards, get one of our flyers. You can go to our website if you don't live in the D.C. area or Atlanta or West Palm Beach or some of the places where I have offices. But there are organizations that can help you. We've got direct links to these lenders, and we really will try to negotiate with the lenders. Job loss is really where you have a bigger problem. And so we need to really take a look at your personal situation and come up with a solution.
Okay. Let me give you a similar question to add on to that. because you kind of touched on it. It says that as the housing market improves, banks are less likely to modify. How can you address the bank's reluctance?
We have not found that to be the case. The reality is when the housing market improves, that there will be fewer and fewer houses on the market, and for you guys that are interested in buying, you really need to look at buying something now while the market is down. But we're actually finding just the opposite. We're finding and we're meeting with a lot of the regulators, Fannie, Freddie, and all of the other regulators, their GSEs, but to really get them to force these lenders to allow people to stay in their homes. So I think that if people would just focus on their homeownership issues earlier, one big problem that we have is that a person has a foreclosure notice, their home is going up for foreclosure on Friday, and they're calling us on Wednesday. Right. Then we need to do something quick. So I just would say that usually we're able to work something out. For us, we're able to save 8 out of 10 homes from foreclosure.
That's
so
huge.
It's okay.
But it means just stepping up and saying, okay, it's a bad situation now, do something immediately.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. It's a question for John. So with helping out with people who've lost their house, is there anything you're doing for the community to get involved in helping those people as well?
Exactly, and I think that, as the panel has said earlier, that it really does take a full community-wide approach. That for far too long, I think there were a lot of different nonprofits trying to help a lot of different communities, and everyone was in their own silo, and there wasn't that much coordination. And really, the problem has gotten to a point that everyone recognizes they can't do it alone. And we're still not great at it, but we're getting there. And I think a lot of folks are really working on this issue. So in every community where we're doing this, we are coordinating as much as we can with the nonprofit groups in the community, with the businesses in the community, and really focusing on connecting with the state and local governments and the communities. I think that's one of the biggest pieces. There was some discussion about how to start a community development project, setting up those coalitions and just talking amongst the community and getting those decisions started and those discussions started of here's what our community needs. How do we get from point A to point B? When you can come to a nonprofit group and say, we've decided that this is the problem, you are so much farther along than most communities. Normally, it's such a divided discussion and so many different groups are trying to figure out the problem. When you can come together and have those real coalition meetings and coalition discussions and figure out the solution that way, the solution is so much easier. It's still work, but it's much easier.
Okay, thank you. There was another question that you may have just answered, but it was specifically about NDC. If a person's lost their job, no child, self-employed with little income, should they come to you directly, or what should they do for options in DC?
What the one good thing about, well, there are many good things about DC, but in DC there are so many resources.
Okay.
And I would say that we are one of many. I was on the phone this week with the attorney from Bread for the City, and they do amazing work in addressing a lot of these sort of homeownership, rental issues. There are so many opportunities in this city. I would say start at the DC government website. It's a good listing of all of the various resources on all of these different issues. We're happy to help out. DCHabitat.org is a great opportunity, but there are a ton in DC.
Okay, thank you. One thing that I see is that so many people don't like to go to the website, the government website, or something that's viewed as a large organization, as a bureaucracy to enter in, because it's like, how much can that help? And what I'm hearing from a couple of you is that there is value in going there and beginning there. Can you all give a perspective on that?
Well, I would agree. I would agree. I think there is value in, in going to government websites. Now, sometimes they tend to be a bit wordy, so you've got a lot of reading there in front of you, but there are resources, and the good thing is that you can go to government websites, county websites, websites, just Google people that you've heard about, Google organizations, and you usually can sort of link from one to the other and get all of the information that you need. When we are in search of things for ourselves and to build businesses or anything that we want to do, research is important. We need to talk to people who have done the things that we want to do, or who have attained these things, or certainly government resources, HUD resources if you're dealing with homeownership issues or housing issues, health issues. I mean, there's a lot out here.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. First of all, what are some of the, and this is directed to Carrie, what are some of the major mistakes individuals make when building wealth, and what made African Americans get bad loans in the first place?
Well, the major mistakes that I see people make is they don't have a disciplined plan. They don't have a disciplined plan where they say, I'm putting an X amount of money away and I'm putting it away religiously. When I went through those different classes, one of the things that I see people who have wealth, and they continue to do, many of you are familiar with 401k and deferred comp. And it's so automatic, you don't think about it. But many people with wealth come to us and they automatically set up 2 or 3 other strategies just like that. Say, I want this to go to my kids automatically. I want this to go to additional savings account, and I want this to go to my vacation account. And it comes out of their check automatically, so it builds up. A common mistake people do is they do not pay themselves first and have it come out regularly. We've all heard that term. It's so basic, but even some of the wealthiest people that I work with, they still don't have certain things they know they want to do, have it come out automatically. And then lastly, and this is common, what made you wealthy isn't necessarily what's going to keep you wealthy. People kept talking about real estate, real estate, real estate. It too can come crashing down. The technology bubble come crashing down. I've lived through 3 or 4 different types of crashes. Last year is only second to the Depression. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, congratulations to you. You've made it through one of the worst times in history. Ben Bernanke, the Federal Reserve, said the recession's turning around. Now, we know in our community, we may see it a little slower than others, but things aren't just turning around. It's not just a recession. For some of you just getting started, or some of you who take advantage of the opportunity, this is a reset. It's an ability to get things at a deep discount. When you start understanding the economics and the cycles, you start realizing, I have to get comfortable with things going up and down and knowing when to stay with it and when to adjust.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I can answer that, particularly the second question, which is how did people get these terrible loans?
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion about greed in the mortgage industry. Well, we know that there are a whole lot of thieves out here. As far as that's concerned, there's a whole lot of greeds, and there's a whole lot of greed. But the reality is also this, that you guys know that when you look at all of these banks, these lenders, they are in business to make money by whatever means necessary. And this is what they're going to do. And this is what they did. Now, once we understand this, we have to know that we have to do something to protect ourselves, because nobody is going to be looking out for us but us. The lenders are going to look out for themselves, even as we deal with this whole foreclosure issue. And that's why it is good to have an organization to help advocate for you in dealing with these lenders. But I want to talk about these loans so that we can make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that we made in this whole subprime issue. Number one of the biggest, I guess, challenges that we faced then and we face now guys, is that lots of us got into these homes, didn't look at a credit report, didn't know what our credit score was. I mean, just got into a home, met somebody at church, and I hate to just use the church, but I mean, that met somebody that you trusted who, you know, was a jackleg loan officer or realtor or whatever, and they came up and I could hook you up on a mortgage. You know, and you're thinking, well, fine, if somebody can hook me up, let me just jump for it. But the reality is that's fine when you're talking about $500, but when you're talking about, you know, $100, $200, $300, $500,000, we can't do this. I mean, this is just not smart. We are dealing with people right now that make $58,000. That's their gross income, and they bought a home for $600,000. Now, you know that is crazy. Now, you can say, well, didn't you know what you were doing? Because I can tell you that a lot of people in this country, they're faulting 100% the home buyers who are now the homeowners. I don't see it that way. But I can tell you that, as I said earlier, the less you know, the more somebody is going to make off of you. The folks that got into these subprime loans, many of them didn't even know what an ARM loan was. I mean, we have people who had fixed rate mortgages. They were in a home, doing well, paying their mortgage, and someone came up to them and I could hook you up with an interest-only mortgage. You know, they just kind of barely knew what that was, but they trusted the person, and they had good jobs. They were doing well. They went from the interest-only mortgage, and I'm telling you, these folks are going from paying $1,300 a month to $1,800 to $3,200 to $5,000 a month. Now, tell me if they can stay in their home. Now, the reality is, should they have known? Yes. But you know, when we get so anxious and we just go into a house and it's looking great and you want the house and you start imagining all the cookouts and the people from church that you're going to have to come to the house, you know, I mean, all that goes out the window. That is why we have to be prepared and informed and educated about money, and educated about homeownership. We've got to know right from wrong, fact from fiction. And we cannot put our whole lives, into the laps of realtors and loan officers. And they're good, and you're going to have to work with them. But you know, there are just some things that we need to do. We've got to deal with the credit. These were the issues, the debt, you know, no money saved, and lack of information. I mean, so these are things that we can do better about.
You know, I got to tag onto that because smart people are ignorant too. You know, and
it's not just low income.
No. Smart people are ignorant too. We live in a stigmatized society. We are afraid to say we don't know something.
That's right.
Yeah. And this is how it happens. You know, it could be money, it could be mental health, it could be anything. But we have somehow conditioned ourselves that we can't go out and ask somebody for help.
For help, that's right.
When I worked for a community development corporation one time, I had a woman came into my office. She came in with a live check from her mortgage broker, right? Because she was a month behind on her mortgage, and so they provided her with a check that was going to help her pay her mortgage. The fine print on it said, you know, if you cash this check, you will readjust your mortgage, and it will readjust to 23.99%, which was the highest rate that you could pay. Thank God she asked.
Yes.
You know, because if she hadn't, she would have been screwed.
That's right.
You know, but that's what we have to get beyond. We just have to get beyond the fact that it's okay to say you don't know something.
I'm going to coattail on that because our company puts out a lot of research, and this is unique because what happened is two things govern investing in general: fear and greed. We're in kind of a fear stage now. People are feared. The appetite for risk is gone or little but nothing. In the Wall Street Journal this morning, they're talking about, people are starting to talk about IPOs. The appetite for risk is just coming back. But when you look at the mortgage industry, this is basically what happened, okay? We know about subprime. A lot of people, the difference between now and depression, I saw a research piece that said in the depression, when people start losing their homes, they're in cheese lines. Now people are losing their homes, what they're going to do, they're going to go back to renting. So what they're saying is, if you don't know how a bank makes money, when they write that loan, they make money, then they sell the loan. people started getting greedy. Now, very smart people didn't know what they owned, because there was people who couldn't afford to have a home that were buying these mortgages, but the banks sell the loans, and they sold them to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Well, then the investment bank said, well, we should, we weren't the originators. We're the idiots that we want to get in the game and buy a little bit too. So we started putting 2%, 3% of the portfolio buying what they call package securities, these mortgage products. And there's mortgage, no one knows what was in the mortgages. And then when the people started defaulting and the values went down, the accounting law says if you do not know the value of the product at the end of the day, you got to mark it to zero. So the investment banks had to write billions of dollars down. And then most banks, as you know, have capital requirements, so they had to start raising capital. And where are they getting the money? They weren't on the street. If you're following the papers, they were on the street trying to raise money. And then all of a sudden, something happened, never happened before. Lehman Brothers went out of business. And then they're like, wow, we didn't know that could happen. Then banks stopped loaning to each other temporarily, and everything froze. Auction rate certificates, one of the liquid markets that many institutions, it froze up. People didn't even want to trade liquid markets. So the whole environment, just the credit markets, and as they can echo, froze. And now they have started to thaw because the government stepped in and said, we're going to lower interest rates, and they lowered interest rates. In History Economics 101, when you lower interest rates, it releases money in the economy. The first thing we do is we refinance. It releases money. People don't put it back in the home. They start spending again. They're hoping it's cost spending. Companies refinance their debt. They bring in their bonds and issue them at lower rate. And when the next shoe to drop is when they tighten it, they raise interest rates. That's why people are afraid of inflation in the next 2 or 3 years. So will this happen again? Well, they're putting legislation in place to hope it doesn't. But the investment banks were participating in mortgage products, and they didn't know what they owned. People were getting greedy. And then when it came home to roost, it's like, what do we own? Which took Merrill Lynch out of business and many of these financial firms, because this was happening. They're making decisions over the weekend. We don't have the money. What we're going to do? Merrill Lynch was sold, Bank of America, over the weekend. How are you going to do your due diligence on a multi-billion-dollar firm in 72 hours? Hence why they're still in the news. That's what happened.
Thank you. You can see, look at the enthusiasm we have on this panel. But this is a big deal. It's impacting all of us. So I have a lot of questions that are very specific and personal, and I'm going to put it, I'm going to phrase it this way to each of the panelists. Given a choice, should I buy, build, or rent? And does it matter, does the geography I'm in matter? Because I have people have asked questions, should I be buying or renting in Texas? Should I be building or buying in D.C., in California? So, but the question is, should I be buying right now, building right now, or renting right now? And is the answer different based on geography?
I'll start with that. The answer to that is determined by how much money you have. I mean, the reality, that's really it. If you have the money, and if you are making $50,000, but you have no money saved and your credit needs some work, you can't buy. You got to rent, and you sure can't build. So, it's that type of real simple analysis that is absolutely necessary. Now, I'll give you.
Everybody's up, and somebody else is down.
I'll give you an address in Atlanta where you can get. Kansas City, places like this. When you go, Florida. You can get steals of a deal in Florida. You won't find those kinds of steals of a deal up here. But really, we often think about what we should do, can do, but really our pocketbooks will determine the reality of where we're going to end up. And I want you to know that you might really, guys, you need to start small. Don't jump out there and get all stressed out. If you're renting and, save a little bit of money and get your credit straight, so then you buy. And when you buy a home that you can afford with a fixed rate mortgage. Don't jump into anything where you can barely go out to eat. just because you've got a mortgage. So these are things that you want to think about. And as our panelists said, I mean, I think Scott brought this up earlier. You know, we need, when you're going to make big investments, when we know that we don't know, we need to seek help. Talk to some folks, come to some nonprofits, talk to some, you know, just really get out there and get some questions answered.
Okay, thank you. Before we move forward with the answers from each and every panelist, I want to do a reset because we've had a lot of people coming in. I want to make sure that you know that I'm asking questions from these cards where you write the questions down. When you have written a question, please put your hand up and a staff member will take it and give it to me. Also, I want to make sure that you know who we have here, who's given us all this good information. There is so much for us to know. On the far end, we have Scott Spencer, who's manager of Baltimore Relations with the Annie Casey Foundation. We have Marcia Griffin, who's president of Home Free USA. We have John Snook, who's director of state and local relations with Habitat for Humanity. And we have Kerry Hall Jr., who's vice president of investments at UBS. So, same questions. Do I build? Do I buy? Do I rent? Who wants to answer that next? John?
I think I want to add a little bit on to what Marcia was saying. The key to that is you should do whatever makes sense for you. And the way you figure that out is through this sort of education that Marcia is talking about, that homeownership education programs, that financial counseling, budgeting, all of those are readily available in the community. And when you get to that point that you're able to make that decision for yourself, you're really going to be in a good situation. With Habitat, for example, most of our family members, our partner family members, are under 50% of area median income. Now, with that, they are in a situation where you would think that they would be the folks who would be unable to have a mortgage. And in most instances, traditional mortgage companies consider them non-credit worthy, not able to get a mortgage. We work with them specifically on these sort of education processes, on budgeting, on all of these things that we're talking about. And even through this homeownership crisis that we're having, our foreclosure rate is under 5%. And that's because of that focus on budgeting, on education, and knowing what you're actually getting when you sign up for that mortgage, and really focusing on that true affordability, that you're not getting in a situation where you have an ARM that in 4 years it's set to some T-bill, something you don't know anything about, and it's going to be at 24%, something like that. So just making sure you know what you're getting into, and you have the education that you can really decide that question for yourself.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, I guess my way of putting it would be, how many people a lot of people out here probably had somebody who said, oh, somebody asked me to lend them $1,500, and when I went back to get it from them, they told me they didn't have it, and and I'm really strapped right now. And I said, you don't give away any more than you can afford to lose. It is really that. To me, I can't answer which one of those three you should do, but you don't give away any more than you can afford to lose. You don't invest any more than you can afford to lose. And part of the, sort of backing up on what Marcia said about that person making $58,000 buying a $600,000 house. Well, somebody told them that, oh, your payment's going to be $240 a month for the next 40 years. You don't do anything more than so they told you could do it. You got to look inside yourself and figure out what it is, because it's not that you're planning on losing it. It's that you have to be prepared for that eventuality, that something is going to go wrong, and you have to have the resources to be able to make up for it. That's my answer to your question.
Thank you. Kerry.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, to echo everything they're saying, and to kind of add to that, you can't do more than you can afford. But as a wealth advisor, when we sit down with clients and are talking about either purchasing their first home or multiple homes, we put pencil to pad and do the math. Not just the mortgage. You got to say, okay, how much is the taxes? Do the taxes go up in that district? Okay. In addition to that, okay, what is the utilities? What is the average garbage? When we purchased our first home years ago, we went to the previous owner and said, we want to see what was the average utility bill, what's the garbage, sewerage, and you get all these, because a lot of people don't know you're getting hit with all these additional things that you're going to be required to pay monthly. And also in that same vein, when you purchase, a home, you have to realize it's always wonderful that every month you're investing into your own home and you're building up equity. In the 1980s, it was required to put 40 or 50% down in that environment, and the rate was 18%. Mm-hmm. We're in a different environment today. And if you're a first-time home buyer and you're renting, the best thing to do is save, and to the point where, in a perfect world, what you want to do is almost have a seamless transition where you can say, okay, I can just about live the same lifestyle, do savings and everything else, and my mortgage is not much different than what I was paying in rent. Unfortunately, what happens is the mortgage is always much higher normally than what you were paying in rent, because there's all these additional issues. So if you don't do pencil to pad, if you don't Google and go to some websites that have calculators so you can actually do this, ladies and gentlemen, we're in an information age, and everyone worldwide is using this. If you don't become familiar with what's out there that can keep you from being hoodwinked, you're doing yourself a disservice. Put pencil to pad, do the numbers, do not be emotional, and see if it makes sense for you. Everybody's different.
Thank you. Another question is, do you recommend using, and even can you use, financial advisors even when you have limited resources, or it's perceived that you do?
Well, that sounds like me.
Are you going to take us if we, don't make much money? Or will a financial advisor take us?
There's many types of financial advisors out there, and the common mistake people make is when they go to a dentist, they're looking for a certain type of service. If they had a bad experience, what do? Gee, I just need to get another dentist. What people don't notice is when they deal with financial advisors, they have a bad experience. They're like, oh, I'm never using a financial advisor again. I'm not going to save. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to contribute to my 401k. There are financial advisors that focus on individuals that are just starting. And there's different types. There are financial planners that only give advice, that give you a plan and that you have to implement it. Our firm gives us the ability to give financial advice and wealth, but we are only compensated on investments that we manage and make sure are moving in the right direction, make sure they stay in track. So many wealth advisors, as they become more senior in the business, they have to run a business like anyone else and say, well, how much am I worth an hour? If someone has $1,000 and I'm doing a financial plan and all this, does it make sense for me to give them service or try to give it to someone who that's all they do? And that's where people make a mistake. Find the financial advisor that fits you. Interview, ask questions, Google, look at what financial advisors do, how they get paid. Yes, you should get a financial advisor if that's what you need, but don't go to the wrong financial advisor, get a bad experience and say, oh, well, all they did was insurance. Well, that was maybe more insurance-oriented financial advisor. So the financial advisors, like any professional, are great experts. You just have to make sure you're getting the one that fits your needs.
Thank you. Scott, a question for you. What opportunities are there to give back to the community? Specific things that people who are able to give back can give back?
Boy, the sky is the limit. Opportunities to give back to the community. Well, in East Baltimore this year, we just helped open up a brand new school. It's it's a K-8 school, and what we have in the school, beyond having some great teachers and some really inspired kids, are senior citizens who are part of the Experience Corps. So it's a double giving. The kids are getting something out of somebody who has a lot more experience, and a lot more knowledge, and a lot more depth of history than they do, and the seniors are actually getting something out of it as well, which is the chance to get outside of what can sometimes be a very lonely experience, especially if you're widowed or widower, sitting inside your own apartment and getting to interact, getting outside and interacting with someone. I think the opportunities range from that kind of giving back to actually every now and again when they call, the Habitat Build. You know, you could go out there on a
Right.
you go out there on a Saturday and spend 8 hours and help someone build a house, which is helping to build a community. In certain instances, we've had we see lots of folks. I got to say. Living in an urban environment, it's great having elders from the South. Because one of the things we're experiencing in a city like Baltimore, basically what we call food deserts, where folks don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And so there's now this proliferation in the movement toward urban gardens. Well, you know what? No one gardens better than old folks who grew up in the South.
Okay.
You know, they got a wealth of knowledge, and they teach, and the things that they can teach a kid around both nurturing, patience, what it is that they're growing, and when the right time it is to harvest, are things that last a lifetime. So the opportunities are boundless.
I want to also just say something there. You know, so often in life we're so stressed with time and work and kids and everything else that we really don't feel that we have too much time to dedicate to anyone else. But the reality is, when you give, you get. And for many of us, there are so many opportunities, anything from working in volunteering at schools, volunteering in nursing homes. You know, if you want to, any nonprofit needs volunteers. If anyone in here needs to volunteer, you can volunteer with us, and I'll give you one of my cards. So, I mean, it's really something that there's so many mentoring programs, and there are just so many needs out here that if you can just carve out just a few hours a week, a month, even a year, just giving back that 1, 2, or 3 times will do so much for us, do as much for us as it will for someone else.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding us. Joining us, we're so glad you were able to make it, because we know that you did have another obligation, is Mr. Lawrence H. Parks. Mr. Parks is Senior Vice President, External and Legislative Affairs, the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. And so, Mr. Parks, if you could please just give us your an overview of your perspective on living in the Black, building wealth solutions.
Okay, a nice narrow topic, right? Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I was tardy. I had a couple of other meetings that ran late, and they all ran over. So I guess I got here on time, believe it or not. I appreciate Congressman Lewis inviting me to participate in this panel. I think it's an odd one for someone what I do, but I think when you look at wealth creation and the focus in our community, I mean, there are 2 things that really sort of stand out. One, I think, is that the number one issue for wealth creation in our community, the number one way in which wealth was created over the last 30 years has been home ownership. And that, I sit next to someone who's in Baltimore, which is like at the epicenter of the decline of the home ownership in America. And I think that rather than being melodramatic and going through what I've had to go through in other panels here today as to what the problem was and why the problem has occurred, I think when we look at solutions, we need to always remember that the cornerstone is really how do you amass capital. And traditionally in ethnic families, and by that I mean Irish, Italian families, Polish families, ethnic whites, and Jewish families, the way that they elevated themselves up the economic ladder was first with a home. If you look at lots of ways in which this was done to encourage that, I mean, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, the effort was made in places like Baltimore and places like Washington and Philly and Jersey and other places where parish priests basically worked with people who lived in the neighborhood and encouraged them to buy up the block. And that became the cornerstone for working class whites to move ultimately into the middle class. For our folk, barriers to entry were huge. Jim Crow is not just an artifact in a history book. I mean, it continued all over. It was all over the country. It wasn't just the South. Yeah, you couldn't sit in the back. You couldn't ride a bus, and it was more aggressive. But in the Northeast and Midwest and in the West Coast, you still had the same phenomenon, which was you were denied credit to actually purchase a home and enter into that ladder of what ultimately created the middle class. I mean, in 1961, as recently as 1961, when John Kennedy became president, there were lines in the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, the guys who guarantee loans now, there were actually requirements that you did not lend in changing neighborhoods. And John Kennedy came in and struck that requirement. So by law, the government for 30 years, from the creation of FHA, which was created basically to create a middle class in this country, basically actively said, we don't provide those loans to those people, meaning us. And that was the basis for a lot of when people climbed out of their ethnic ghettos into the middle class, was through home ownership and a partnership with the government, the GI Bill and FHA. So there's no shame in partnering with the government. And that was what was done for basically the ethnic white community, to move them from poor to working to middle class. When you fast forward to black folk, our opportunity really came after the Civil Rights Movement, and our focus on access to capital really didn't come until the 90s. As recently as 1989, the Atlanta Constitution did a study on the barriers to entry on minority discrimination, a color of money study, that showed that basically a black and a white family of similar economic means, the black family was consistently denied access to credit for a mortgage, which was really the birth of the expansion of the Community Reinvestment Act and all these things that you hear about as far as access to credit and capital that Congress actually put in place. But that didn't happen really until 1989 and didn't get enforced until 1994 with Bill Clinton and the Justice Department. So basically we had a 10-year window when there was an attempt to balance the scale. And just putting in historical context, ethnic white communities basically had from the Great Depression well into the 60s and continuous, where government was acting as a partner. Anglo-Saxon communities came to this country primarily to own land as their source of wealth. So the Anglo-Saxon community, the WASP, the dominant community, already owned land. The way to get other ethnic groups in, government assistance, and then we get ours for 10 years. So then you forward to today, and you say, okay, so what's the solution? So I give you the problem. The solutions are, I mean, there were a lot of charlatans that were out there that took advantage of the fact that we didn't know what mortgage product made sense. As a community, we're also shy and new to credit. So a lot of people who were capable of getting conventional lending didn't get it, and people made money by giving you a worse loan. And then those of us who probably weren't really economically prepared to be able to take on the challenges of home ownership were given loans that basically didn't make sense. So these three things happen. When we go forward, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. One of the things we've got to be concerned about is making sure that people in our community don't think home ownership is a bad thing, because they're going through a tough time now and they're losing homes, and I don't want to get into that again. Well, no, it means mistakes were made. Let's not make those mistakes again. And I think you got to demand the government not take it. We can't take that on personally. This was done to us in large measure because people made money by exploiting a weakness and an opening of lack of knowledge. So we've got to really figure out now, as far as solutions, I think one of the things you've got to look at is two things. One, the Congress is debating these issues right now. Congressman Lewis and others will be voting on financial services reform efforts. You've got to make sure that the interests of our communities are represented, that we're not getting screwed over. And then the second thing is, I got a time constraint. The second thing I would put on the table is that there's going to be a reform of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Banks called GSEs. Those are the places that actually make sure that there's credit available in our community. We've got to make sure Congress knows. We're going to be watching them to make sure whatever reforms they do in that effort, they're not going to harm our access to capital and credit. So government's partnership with the community for access to capital and credit is central, and that we've got to make sure that just because we got a 10-year window and the country went to heck in a handbasket through no fault of our own, that we're not the victims.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give him a hand. He came in and he netted it out for us without knowing what we had already talked about. So thank you so much. Just a reminder also, a couple of reminders. First of all, I'm asking questions from the cards that you all are giving me. So if you have any questions, please write them on these cards that were in your folders and raise your hand. A staff member will get them to me. Also, the congressman is expected to be here in just a couple of minutes. Another question. Black America used to have a Black Wall Street. How can Black Americans recreate another Black Wall Street? It's a question for any or all of the panelists.
I get stuck with the question. There you go. At the end of the table, I think a couple of things. I mean, that was Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think we've got to understand at that time. I mean, we were living in a segregated society, and so you could have separate but equal, separate but unequal situations, which your capital was circulated primarily in your community. I think the question we need to be asking is how do we make sure we circulate capital better in our communities, purchase from our stores, and also make sure that those stores are actually used by and people of other communities as well. But I think as far as creating a separate financial marketplace, I think that time is past. We're in a global economy. We're economically integrated into the society, even if we're at the bottom rung. And I think we have to demand how can Wall Street make better access to the black community, and we make sure that there's more representation in Wall Street and in their products.
I'd like to add to that also. I think that, yes, times have changed, but I think that the essence of this question is how can we become financially stronger as a people? And, without going through, a lot of issues, I will say that certainly at the time back in the 20s in Oklahoma as with now, it starts with this kind of environment where people can come together, discuss new ways of doing things, some things for you guys, for all of us really to think about. And really when we leave out of these kind of sessions as they did then, and people were a whole lot more spread out then, we will leave out with with just some new thoughts, new ideas, new resources, because this is really what we need in our community. We need to know where to go, who to talk to, where the money is, and where the opportunities are. And we need to really be a part of environments like this and others where we can really synergize our thoughts in terms of economics and business and how we're going to get there. One thing, certainly for us, God has given us as a people such resilience that a lot of other people don't have. We are a people that can be knocked down to the ground, stamped on, walked over, and still get up. And laugh, too, sometimes. And laugh once we're able to get over it. I mean, we have resilience that very few other people have. And so it is not by coincidence that we are here today. It is not by coincidence that, hopefully you guys will be able to take just some of the kernels of information that we can provide to you, and, and we can really kind of move forward and learn together.
The largest or fastest growing nonprofit micro lending group in the world is Kiva. It is where people. It's historically started, I think, in third world countries where people have an idea for a small business, and it's like you invest $5, and you have an idea, you get people to invest their $5 in it. I was at a meeting a couple weeks ago in Cleveland, where they are really moving toward what they call Sustainable Cleveland toward 2019. And one of the target populations that they wanted to work with were people who've been locked out of the markets. And so they're starting generating this idea, which they're now calling Cleva, and really trying to figure out how to capitalize, not to take away at all from the idea that yes, we ought to be in the marketplace, but there are people for whatever reason have been locked out of markets, and so Cleva is really trying to bring investments into underserved markets and communities through sort of groundswell and ground up investments by community partners in good ideas. And so that's something that, Kiva is the international thing to look at, but there's a model out there that might translate into especially underserved, disadvantaged and minority communities.
Well, I can speak to this because I am Black Wall Street. So I actually, and I am Black Wall Street. And I will tell you this, that Wall Street is very fast-paced, it's moving, and I want to reiterate on something I said earlier. It starts with education. It starts with education, familiarizing yourself, attending panels like this, going to seminars, because when it comes down to making decisions, if you do not have enough information, the moment's going to pass you by. We cannot wait for you to digest it because the opportunity sometimes comes and goes. I think one of the reasons why I've been successful in my practice the last 16 years, I started out initially managing risk. And I used to tell clients, well, you're on your way. I don't think you need to take that much risk. And as you educate yourself about risk, every investment has risk. Even not investing has risk because you don't keep up with the rising cost of living. That's called inflation. So when you start educating yourself, then you can make more appropriate decisions and understand the almighty dollar. You know, the panelists that just got here made a great point. You know, the dollar is a very blunt instrument, but it's very, very powerful. If you take your dollar and you buy something with a black accountant, a doctor, attorney, they take that home and they feed their children, they put their kids through school, and the dollar stays in the community. That's why some other cultures have been successful on how to keep the dollar and the mighty dollar growing in the community. But also, if you don't galvanize that dollar, put it to work. A lot of times in the seminars I give throughout the United States, I said $1, if you took a $20 bill and put it on the floor, that's what most of you have. Everyone has money sit on the floor, not working for you, not gaining any interest. It's like having money sitting at home on the couch, drinking a Heineken and watching Oprah Winfrey. That's just lazy dollars, we call it. Right, actually, that's an oxymoron, because if you're drinking Heineken, you probably wouldn't be watching Oprah Winfrey. But there's only 5 ways to grow your funds. There's only 5 ways to grow money. A lot of you know about interest-bearing accounts, CDs, dividends. Most senior companies pay retained earnings, dividends. You can build up dividends. Most mutual funds reinvest dividends. The third way is capital appreciation, one of the most aggressive ways. Google can go up, that's appreciation. 1 year or less, you're taxed at the highest tax bracket. 1 year longer, you're taxed much less. So you gotta understand the rules of the game when it comes to capital appreciation. The fourth way is tax efficient investing. This is where many people make a lot of wealth. Tuck it away from Uncle Sam. IRAs, 401ks, you're not taxed on it until you take it out. And the Roth IRA, you put it away, you're never taxed on it again. The 529 plan, college savings, you put it in there, gross tax deferred, you're not taxed when you take it out. Tax deferred, tax efficient investing. And the fifth way is what our community has a challenge doing: funding, putting money away regularly. Funding is the fastest way to grow your wealth. I'm a money maker, not a magic maker. You got to put it away. And if we're not educated, when I come to you and say, I've got a municipal bond, tax-free insured, I come to you and say, here's some CDs, you like, I don't have the funding, you're missing out. And Black Wall Street, when I started my business 16 years ago, 2% of my client base was African American. And I'm successful because I enjoy working with people. But I got to tell you, when I sit down and the person across from me looks like me, I enjoy doing that business. Today, my client base is 35% African American. And I got to tell you, I'm pleased to say things are changing, and I think I'm a little bit more patient than most, because I understand. I didn't grow up, my generation didn't talk about my parents' money around the dinner table, but our peers, their parents are talking about money, risk, the environment around the dinner table. This is what I challenge you to do. Go out and teach your children. When we're talking about philanthropic, I serve on the board of directors for the last 8 years of the founding chapter of 100 Black Men. We started the Eagle Academy, and our initiative was every student. We started out just with a freshman class initially. Now we're going into our new freshman class. We went 4 years. Every student would have a mentor. What they see is what they'll be. Phoenix House, the largest substance abuse organization, came to me a year and a half ago and asked me, would I like to serve on the board? And I said, well, I don't know, because I have a problem of the failure rate, the tendency for people to lapse, but it's part of the recovery stage. We're in a situation where the environment is resetting, okay? Recession, this is a chance for you to really get in. But this is a lapse. You have to get back on board. You can't be afraid of risk. Educate yourself. You'll get ahead.
Thank you, Kerry.
Yep.
And in fact, we continue to hear that we need to educate ourselves. One of the questions that I can't find now was what can we do to make this kind of education a requirement in the schools? What can we do around that? Anybody have any ideas?
Well, I think the easiest and the point that I sort of emphasize is make sure your leaders, your community leaders, your politicians understand that it's a priority for your community. That's the easiest way to get something in a curriculum, to get a law passed. If they recognize that it's something that you all are interested in, that the community is interested in, that it's a priority, they're going to really push it. That's the easiest way.
You know, we actually, one of the challenges is, one of the reasons it's not in education is because we've gotten into an educational system that is teaching people to test. And so until we reform the way we do education, I mean, you know, when I grew up, you know, we were taught to learn. Kids are now being taught to test.
Yes.
And so until that starts happening, you cannot expand the range of opportunities that kids can use to learn.
Or unless we put these questions on the test.
Yeah.
Then we'll be taught it. Okay. Thank you. Here's another question. I love this one. This one is near and dear to me. I have so much credit card debt. Even though I am diligent about paying on time and paying as much as possible above the minimum, my credit card companies are raising rates and denying requests, even though I'm a good customer. How can I fight back and continue my work at eliminating my debt? One of the reasons this one's so near and dear to me is because my mother, who is 85 years old, has the best credit score I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I don't even understand how you have a credit score like that. And still, she got something in the mail. She called me and said, they said that they're raising my interest rate to 25.99%. And I said, Mama, how can that be true? You know, it's like once in a while you use a credit card and you make the payment immediately. It's like you come home and write the check. You know, you don't even like get a little float with it. And so what can a person do? How can you fight back and continue to work at eliminating your debt in this kind of situation?
When I speak to universities and students and I tell them be careful of the credit card situation, is shop around. They want your business. That's just ludicrous to be paying those high interest rates. And sometimes you have to consolidate and actually go to credit card agencies and call them and say, I want you to lower my rate or else I'm just going to have to move it. Now, you have to have the flexibility, you have to have good credit, obviously, to be in a position to negotiate like that. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, understand the way credit agencies rate you. You know, if you're late 60 days, 90 days, it shows up on a report card. If you have a bankruptcy, it stays on your report card 7 years. This limits our access to capital. If you don't have good credit, you don't have access to capital. You should have just 1 or 2 credit cards minimum, and they should have little or no balance. You should pay it off religiously. I'm a little biased because I'm a wealth advisor, and I'm telling you what I see. Wealthy individuals come in, they have, I have a couple credit cards, I never use them. But they don't close them out because it's credit history. They have these credit card scores that go back 15, 20, 30 years, and they've never been late. Flawless. Therefore, their credit scores goes up 750, 800. Until we realize that credit gives you access to capital and that you have to manage that. I heard one of my mentors tell me years ago, what's more important than your money is your credit. I'll end there.
Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, I think Carrie has, pretty much given you what needs to be said here. The credit card companies use a lot of different tactics, but there's no question, whoever wrote that, I can talk to you afterwards and give you some specific and more personal advice, and we could probably work with you to work with you with the credit card companies. But to a large degree, I really would recommend that you start, if you've got a lot of credit cards, just do away with some of those credit cards. If you have credit cards with zero balances, keep them open because the available balance will increase your credit score. Don't be 1 day late in paying off a bill. Try to get on automatic bill pay so that all your bills are paid on time. If that thing is late one day, your credit score will go down. There are a lot of different tax that you really just need to know about and use in building your credit and in building your credit score. It really is the foundation of our financial future in this country. And there are a lot of employers, guys, that look at your credit report.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can really be hurt in finding a job or keeping a job if your credit score goes down. So it's something worth talking about. If the person is still in here, I can talk to you afterwards.
Thank you. Other thoughts on that? Okay. Well, we have been joined by Congressman John Lewis. First of all, a thank you for assembling this group to talk about living in the black, to come up with solutions for building wealth. We have heard so many different kinds of perspectives on our needs and on our solutions, and one thing is clear: we must come together to have these discussions, to actually bare ourselves, to get a little raw about what's happening with us so that we can talk about the solutions. So thank you very much. Thank you, Congressman. And we would now welcome some words from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for moderating this panel. And thank each member of the panel for your presentation. I understand from staff it's been wonderful, that you made a great contribution, and we're more than grateful. Sorry that I couldn't be here. I've been running all over the place today, doing some work on the Hill. We've finished voting, and we're going to come back on Tuesday and going to continue to push, pull, and debate the need for health care. Because if we don't have health, we don't have our health, we don't have much. But it is important that we teach people how to gain wealth during these difficult days. When I was growing up in rural Alabama many, many years ago, as a young child on a farm, I remember in 1944 when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4. I really do. My father had saved $300, and with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. My family still own that land today. And I tell you today, that land is worth a lot of money. Hundreds and thousands of dollars, several hundred thousands of dollars today. It is still in our family. So I'm sure members of the panel probably suggested to you that during this period, we should try to save some of our limited resources and own a piece of the rock. Who was it said that they're not creating any more land? Will Rogers, right? And that if you can afford to buy a little piece, you should hold on to it. In the African American community, especially those of us that come from the heart of the South, hundreds and thousands of our foremothers and forefathers own land. We left Alabama, we left Mississippi, we left Georgia and other places and went north. And then people failed to take care of the land, pay the taxes, and it's sold on the courthouse steps for just a few $100s. So maybe some of you who now live in these urban centers should go back and check some of those old tax records. That when your family left Alabama and went to Detroit, went to Philadelphia, went to Buffalo, left Mississippi, and went to Chicago. It's okay to spend, but it's also okay to save and invest in the future, invest in our children and in our grandchildren. We have a lot of work to do, and I want to thank you, each one of you, for all that you do. Nikina, who've been coordinating this effort from our office, we want to make a few presentation here just to thank you. Nikina, you want to come and read the citation? Since your eyes are better than mine and you have on glasses.
Congressman Lewis would like to present each one of you with a certificate of special congressional appreciation. And it says this certificate is presented to you in recognition of exceptional service as a panelist or moderator at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Annual Legislative Conference, and is dated today and signed by Congressman Lewis. So all of these are presented to you. We have one all the way down to the end. I don't know if he wants to give it to him. Hold on, let me see. Yeah, they want to do all this. Who's that down there next to Marcia? Scott. Then we have one for our panelist, Scott Spencer. Scott. Then we have one for Ms. Marcia Griffin. Oh. And now we have to Mr. John Snook. Thank you. Mr. Kerry Hall, Jr. And a thank you to our moderator, Ms. Janet Crenshaw-Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Crenshaw.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let me again thank each and every one of you for being here. Enjoy the weekend. And this is a time of celebration. This is the first time the caucus coming together, that we have a member of our caucus serving as the President of the United States of America. I see my friend Jim Felder from South Carolina here, who was a student in Atlanta, very much involved in the civil rights movement during the 60s. And as a matter of fact, during the ceremony, the funeral for President Kennedy, he was one of the honor guard. Jim, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. For those of you that are so young, that were not even born a few years ago, was not even a dream, not even a dream. I first came to Washington, D.C. in May of 1961. 21 years old, had all of my hair, and a few pounds lighter to go on something called the Freedom Rides. We traveled through South Carolina, through Virginia, through North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, beaten, arrested, in jail. Came back here in June of 1963 with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others, and met in the Oval Office with President Kennedy. And we told him we were going to march on Washington. And then on August 28, 1963, we had that march. So I was there standing when Dr. King said, I have a dream today, a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. Dr. King spoke number 10, I spoke number 6. And out of the 10 people that spoke that day, I'm the only one around. So I tell you this. So for those of you that are so young, that we must learn never ever to give up or to give in, that we must keep the faith, keep building, keep working, keep pulling and pushing. And we can create wealth, not just for ourselves, but for generation yet unborn. So hang in there. Let's do it. Enjoy yourself. And thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.